Okay, so this is part two of a shir we started last night on the Ralbag's toalos. But for those who were not here for the shir, then I'll do a quick recap of what this is. Ralbag, uh, at the end of his commentaries on Tanakh, most of his commentaries, then he does something called he extracts what he calls toalos, which are lessons, benefits, useful ideas from the text, and they fall into three categories, broadly speaking: halacha, midos, and deos, which is like philosophical or metaphysical ideas. He has a regular commentary, but then at the very end, he like lists these toalos. And so in Megilas Esther, he lists 51 of them. And our goal last night and today is to read through each one of them and then get the idea. But then our larger goal is to understand the derech that he uses in this toeles based learning. Like, what is he doing, and what do we get from it? Yeah, tomorrow.
I forgot if you said this last night. Can you remind us where we can find this?
Yeah, so I don't think I did say that. So in his Chumash commentary, it's at the end of every section, and by section I mean not just the parshas. He divides each parsha up into different sections, so you'll find the list there. In his Megillah commentary, it's at the very end of his Megillah commentary. I think it should be printed in whatever Mikros Gedolos has them. You'll find it at the end of the Ralbag's commentary, and then in Nach there are also sections, but they're much bigger. Like, he'll include like sometimes many prakim of Nach in one section, and then he'll list all the toalos. So the way to find it, if you're learning Nach, is look through the Mikros Gedolos, and then whenever you see many columns of Ralbag, then that means you got to the toalos, and they're usually like listed in bold or with headings if it's a nice Mikros Gedolos. Okay, yeah. Okay, so just to quickly recap, just so you get an idea. So we did 14 toalos last night, and I'm not going to learn through them again, but just to restate it. First toalos is that you should enjoy yourself when you have good. Okay, and that we learned that from Achashverosh's party. Second toeles is that when you throw a party, you should make sure to not incite jealousy among the people who partake of it, but you should treat them equally, and that'll give them greater enjoyment. Toeles number three is that when you are hosting a party, you should make sure that all the guests get what they need, so they don't have to ask, and you should not force anyone to partake of any of anything they don't want to. Fourth toeles is that when you have a party, then the women and the men should be separate, especially if it's a wine party, so that there's not any inappropriate behavior, but also so that the women could pig out and not be ashamed in front of the men. Toeles number five is the misogynistic one, which is that women must obey their husbands, and that is why Vashti was executed, because she didn't obey her husband. The sixth toeles is to tell you that people should avoid gaiva, pride, and you see that Vashti did not want to be summoned to Achashverosh. Sorry, she didn't mind being summoned, but she didn't want to be taken there through the eunuchs. She wanted like an entourage. And so the fact that she refused is what got her in trouble, because of her pride. Seventh toeles is to show you that even if you're going to make a decision that you think is the right decision, you should always seek as much counsel and advice as possible to make sure that you're making the right decision. So Achashverosh did that when Vashti, disobeyed him. Eighth toeles is when you seek advice from a group of people, you should start with the least among them, because if you start with the greatest, then all the lesser people are going to be afraid to say their opinion. So that's why it started with Mumu Khan. He gave the advice first. The ninth toeles, is to show that God arranged for our salvation to come about at our time of distress, because Hashem knew what Haman was going to do, so he set up Esther to become the queen. 10th toeles is to show that Hashem protected us by by seeing to it that Achashverosh sent out these ridiculous letters telling everyone that all the husbands they have to obey, that their wives have to obey them, and it made people not take his letters seriously. So that when the second letters came, then they got they didn't act on them with as much seriousness as they would have otherwise. Then we got into chapter 2. The 11th toeles is the lineage of Mordechai and Esther, to show that Mordechai was from Binyamin, and that was a fulfillment of the bracha to Binyamin. The 12th benefit is to show that you should have compassion towards your relatives and take care of them in a time of need. And because Mordechai adopted Esther, then that is what made her be on good terms with him, which in turn is what allowed Esther to succeed, because she listened to Mordechai's advice. 13th benefit is that you can see signs of things in the beginning. You could see signs of the end in the beginning. So he says, Haggai saw that Esther had the potential to be queen, so he like treated her accordingly to like position her for the best. And then the last one we read was another one from Midos, which is to show that Esther was humble, even though she was made queen. She didn't let that get to her head, and she still listened to Mordecai, and she humbled herself before him by not like rejecting his harsh reprimand. And then this shows that Esther was rewarded for her humility, just like Vashti was degraded for her pride. Okay, that's as far as we got last night. Yes, Esther.
Can you just explain the reasoning behind learning straight out lessons from Achashverosh's actions?
Yeah,
that's not the best.
So this is right. So this is something that's ongoing. Okay, this is part of what we were discovering last night about like why does the Ralbag look at Achashverosh that way? So I did mention that he seems to be going off of the premise that I talked about a lot in my shir of why did Chazal vindicate tzaddikim and villainize Rashayim, that if you look at some of these same behaviors that are being listed here in Achashverosh and Vashti and Memuchan, Chazal take it and they read like imperfections into it. So they say, for example, that Achashverosh was throwing a party not to enjoy the good that God, that is in the world, but to be like a hedonistic thing. And instead of saying that Vashti threw a party for sneeze reasons, then Chazal say that she threw the party for like pritzus reasons, and instead of saying that Memuchan gave his advice first because that's the best way to get advice when you have a bunch of different people, Chazal say he leapt and like inserted himself and like jumped to the front in order to like give advice for some selfish reason. So our question was, why does the Ralbag choose to learn good lessons from these people and these events instead of learning about their degradation? So we didn't fully answer the question. Part of it might just be because he's assuming that Mordecai and Esther wrote these things into the Megillah in order. Actually, no, I don't even think that's a good thing. Yeah, Esther?
So yeah, just in an even more basic thing, less than that. I mean, less than going according to the idea of enhancing the good of tzaddikim and enhancing the good of Shaim. Just in a basic thing, if I just knew that somebody wasn't like the greatest person, I would maybe learn from them, but maybe not. I wouldn't just use their example. I would want to look into it. So is there just an assumption that it's included in the Megillah that it was a good thing? Or
okay, well,
like
so
that?
I guess one thing also I should have mentioned yesterday is it's not clear whether Achashverosh was bad or not, right? So it's a machlokus in the Gemara about whether he was a chacham or a fool. So that's like one machlokus. But then there's machlokus in the Mefarshim about was Achashverosh wicked or was he completely being like played by Haman and he was not wicked at all. And Chazal definitely come down on the side of him being wicked, but I don't recall seeing anywhere in the Ralbag's commentary, which I haven't read through his actual commentary in this year yet. I don't know if Ralbag ever says that Achashverosh was evil. So so starting off with a neutral personality, it's much easier to understand why he's learning good things from that. And when we see, I think we'll see from Haman that I don't think he's going to learn good things from Haman. But that might be why he learns good things from Achashverosh. Yeah. Okay. I actually want to start off before we do the new toalos with one insight that I had. And I am, I'll say this in abstract, but then this is rooted in a real world example that happened to me right after the shir. Okay. So part of this is me just trying to talk through this, but I think it's actually a good example. So in my shir on why Chazal vindicated tzaddikim and villainized Rashayim, I said one of the benefits is by making like superhero figures out of the tzaddikim, it makes it easier to relate to them and to draw inspiration from them and to like to emulate them. And with Rashayim, it makes it so that there's like a taboo associated with them, and like, oh, I don't want to, same way that we like vilify Nazis, rightly so, like it stigmatizes Nazis, and like no one wants to be a Nazi, so no one wants to be a Haman, no one wants to be an Achashverosh. So that's the advantage of Chazal. The disadvantage of Chazal's approach in villainizing Rashayim is that it becomes very easy to break identification with the Rasha and to not see in yourself the same qualities. So, for example, if you see the Rishaim of the Torah as more human than supervillains, it becomes easier to look at yourself in the mirror and see those qualities in yourself as well. And that's part of why I like Mishlei, because even though Mishlei has clean divisions between the fool and the Chacham, or the Rasha and the Tzaddik, you're not treating them as villainous particular individuals, and so it's easier to see these things in yourself. Okay, so I'm gonna not record now. Okay, hold on a second here. Someone remind me to start recording if I forget afterwards. So just to give an example from last night, I mentioned, or we actually looked up the oh no, actually we didn't look this up. We referenced how Vashti was this evil, according to the way Chazal depict her, she was this evil woman who was promiscuous and licentious and engaged in licentiousness, and she forced Jewish girls to work naked on Shabbos in order to to make them violate their own religion and their values. Now there are ideas we can learn from that, right? But let's just take a look at the Ralbag, okay, and see what he learned from Vashti. What's the only thing he learned from Vashti so far, which is probably going to be the only thing he learns because she's dead. Okay, is she didn't want to come when Achashverosh called her, because she felt that it was beneath her dignity to be summoned by servants. So again, you can learn from both, but what am I going to relate to more? Am I going to relate to going around and forcing people to violate Torah in this extreme way, and see myself as Vashti in that way? Or am I going to look at Vashti and say, are there times when I insist on my own kavod in a way that is stupid or detrimental, and that I should be practical? It's that's the kind of lesson that the Ralbag is learning from Vashti. And again, maybe it's just for me, I just think that it's easier to identify with that and to incorporate that into my my decision making than the exaggerated example. Okay. All right, so let's go on to the 15th benefit. We're still in chapter 2. So he says 15th. Oh, and by the way, I have to give credit again. All of these translations are ChatGPT 4 with minor tweaks. And I'll tell you what the tweaks are because they were very few. So he says the 15th benefit is in character traits, is to inform that it is appropriate for a person to consider a minor disgrace if it is a means to achieve a great benefit. For this reason, you will find that Mordecai did not distance Esther from being taken to the king, even if it involved some departure from the ways of the Torah, due to the great benefit that was expected to come to Israel through her, considering their lowly state at the time. Therefore, he commanded her not to reveal her people or her birthplace, lest it be a cause for the king to withhold the queenship from her, even though it would leave her with the disgrace of being the king's concubine. It was deemed better for her to be queen than to remain concubine. Now, when I first started reading this, I thought he was saying that Mordecai was the ends justify the means. You could be taken into Achashverosh and it's going to be good for us, so don't worry, But I think he's not saying that, okay? And I'll support it with reading from his commentary on the Pesukim. His commentary on this is on the Pasuk 2:10. Lohi gida Esther es amav es moladata. Esther did not tell her people and her family, her birth origin. Ki Mordechai tziva Allah asher lo tagi, because Mordecai commanded her not to tell. Okay, so classic question: why did Mordecai tell her not to tell? So here is the Ralbag's theory. Yidameh, it seems. Wait, hold on. Yeah, it seems ki Mordecai ra'a shehi tiye malka tachas Vashti. Mordecai saw that likely she's going to be the queen in place of Vashti. Ulefisha al yada yitachin shiagia tov liYisrael, and since it was possible through her hand to bring good to Israel, Siva Allah, he commanded her shelo tagid me'eze am hi, to not tell what nation she's from. Why? Kedei shelo ya'azvena hamelach ba'avur ra'oso shuhu me'am shafel shuhu gola ben ha'umos, so that the king would not abandon her on account of the fact that she's from a lowly nation that is exiled. So you got to remember, the Jews were a defeated nation at this time. Okay, so and Achashverosh is this aspiring, politician, right? He muscled his way into the Malchus because he wasn't born that into Malchus. So he's going to want a queen that is befitting of someone who's a legitimate king, and he's not going to want someone from an illegitimate place. So you put two and two together, I think, and you tell me if you think I'm reading the Ralbag in the wrong way. I think what he's saying is like this: all the virgins were taken. Okay, that was not a choice. He did not have, Mordechai did not allow her to go to Achashverosh. But the choice that Mordechai did have was, is it better for her to to be, raped by Achashverosh and then put into the harem with all the other virgins, or to remain in the position of being queen? And he said that it's going to be better off for the Jews, given the choice between those, it's not only the lesser of two evils, or I guess I don't even know if it's the lesser of two evils, but they're both evil. But you're going to position yourself to a point where you could potentially have great benefit for the Jews, and that's why the Ralbag ends, or focuses on this, the commandment of Mordechai telling her not to reveal where she's from, because that would jeopardize her ability to be the queen. And so I think that's what he's saying here. And so even though it's a disgrace that she's going to be with the king, it's also a disgrace that she's going to be a concubine. And being a queen is going to be better for the Jews than to be a concubine. Okay, so that is for character traits. So I think this is another, what we did last night also is we took the Ralbag's toalos and then learned our own ones, okay, from this. So I think you could get another toeles from this, which is, there's that principle of don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. That if you, just because you can't have it perfect doesn't mean that you should squander your ability to even have something that's less than perfect. So too, how would you say it in a way that's the reverse of that? Don't let the bad be the enemy of the less bad. In other words, just because you have two bad options doesn't mean that you should just throw up your hands and say, well, there's nothing we can do here. No, look at the options and say, well, what is the best thing that you can do given these bad options? And I'm going to use a weird example. I've quoted this before. I heard this anecdote, I assume it's real, about this this woman who was this very look on the bright side of things person in Auschwitz, a Jew who got taken to Auschwitz. And so they just arrived there and they were all being tattooed. So she's walking around asking questions, and someone asked her what are you doing? She said, I'm trying to find which tattoo artist is the best tattoo artist, and someone said, why are you doing that? You're being tattooed like an animal and given a prison number. And she said, look, I don't have a choice whether to get a tattoo, but I could at least make the best of it and get the best quality tattoo possible. So a person could easily look at that and say oh, what a waste of time and energy. But what did this allow her to do? This allowed her to retain a sense of control and agency in a situation where so many people were having that totally stripped from them and could have just given up hope. She's trying to retain agency and saying, well, I have a lot of bad eventualities in front of me, but at least I could seize the one that is going to allow me to be in control here. So that's a similar, but not exactly the same thing that the Ralbag is saying. Okay. Yes, Tamar.
I read an interesting thing that was related to this. If I can just say quickly. It was by someone who, she basically was framing it as, when you have to choose, when you're making a hard decision, you kind of don't want to have to pick, because you don't want to start leaning into a bad thing. This is why people put off hard decisions sometimes. But she was calling it there's no secret option C. There's no secret option C where Esther gets to get away from this situation. So then she was choosing the Chachma between the options that were available to her.
That's great. That's a great way to call out the Havamina, right? The Mishleik Havamina, that there's an option C, so I don't want to do any of these, right? Yeah, that's.
I'll send the link in chat later. This was really interesting.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's hopefully I remember that phrasing also. Okay, next toeles. The 16th benefit, do we skip one? No. 16th benefit is to inform of the greatness of the divine providence over Israel, even when they're in the land of their enemies. God granted Esther favor in the eyes of the king over all of the other beautiful young women gathered from the entire kingdom. Note that the king had occupied himself with concubines for about 3 years, because in the 3rd year of his reign, there was the matter of Vashti. Then the young women were gathered in Shushan, and in the 7th year of his reign, Esther was taken to the royal palace. When you subtract the 4 years, including the years of their beauty treatments, which was 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months with perfumes and cosmetics to improve their skin and cleanse them of body odors, 3 years remain. Throughout these 3 years, Achashverosh had occupied himself with concubines and was not satisfied until Esther came before him. And then all the remaining virgins were also brought before the king. This indicates that God granted her additional favor over all the virgins throughout the kingdom. So very interesting point here. So starts off by saying that God had hashgacha on Klal Yisrael even in Galus. And maybe maybe you guys don't think this way. When I think about what the theme of Purim is, I think it's hashgacha, right? That God, like the Rambam says in the beginning of the Mishnah Torah, that that this shows us. Let's just read the Rambam because we haven't read it yet this year. The Rambam in the introduction to the Mishnah Torah, after the list of the 613 mitzvos, addresses the question of mitzvos d'Rabbanan. Okay, and there he says that every d'Rabbanan is not an addition to the Torah, because that would be Baal Tosif. He says, but when they add to the Torah, then they are doing it to strengthen the Torah by way of a takana or a hora or a gezerah. So he gives an example. This is what we say: that the prophets with the Beis Din enacted and commanded us to read the Megillah in its time, to recall the praises of God and the salvations that he did for us. He was close to respond to our outcry, in order to bless him and praise him, and to inform the subsequent generations that it's true what the Torah promised us. What nation is a great nation that has God who's close to it, like Hashem our God, whenever we call him? That's the same. That's a model like for every rabbinic mitzvah. So in other words, it's amplifying a theme in Torah. Here, the theme is God's closeness to us, and that he responds to us when we call. So to me, when I think of the theme of Purim, I think that that's the theme, is that God is close to us and he has hashgacha over us. What I don't think of is that God has hashgacha over us specifically in Galus. Okay, and you got to remember, this is Galus Bavel, and the Jews were kicked out. Mikdash was destroyed, Yerushalayim was burned, and they were kicked out of Israel because God rejected them, and yet God is with them even in Galus. And I think that little addition of even in Galus, I think, does place a much more, it identifies a much more relatable theme for Purim for the state that we're in now, because we still are in Galus, different Galus, but it's the same one. So I think the fact that he leads with that is noteworthy. And then he points out that like the extent to which Achashverosh went to try to find like a queen that was unsuitable, and so it makes the miracle, or I shouldn't say the miracle, I don't think Ralbag's calling it a miracle, the hashgacha that Esther was chosen, that much more like that much more wondrous. Like you read certain or you hear certain behind the scenes for certain movies with the casting directors, especially for like child actors, and they're like, yeah, we had to like audition like 1 million kids, and like we finally found the perfect one, finally found Daniel Radcliffe as Harry Potter, so like this is like what are the it shows that let's say Esther had been picked in the first 10 choices, you'd be like, okay, fine, so like he liked her. But no, this guy clearly was not satisfied by anybody, but he was satisfied by Esther, so like it shows God's hand in that. So that's, again, just underscoring like the role of the hashgacha. Okay, next, the 17th benefit is to inform of the great wisdom that was in our nation at the time. For this reason, you will find that Mordechai, who was among the exiles with Yechonia and worked as a scribe and a metal worker. Now, I don't know where he gets that from. Have you ever heard that Mordechai was a sofer and a metal worker? I've just never heard that. Okay, and I don't know, I thought he was like a judge. I mean, I guess he was due to his wisdom among the king's judges and sitting at the gate. His wisdom also led to the revelation of the plot by Bigsan and Seresh to lay hands on King Achashverosh. So it is significant, I think, that I don't know what the norms were in Persia back then, but like it is significant that Mordechai, even though he was from this exiled nation, and he was not even from the tribe of royalty, he was from Binyamin, Shevet Binyamin, that he had a position of prominence in the king's palace, which shows that he was qualified, to advise the king or to be like, play some sort of like official role. So that is something to admire here. Okay, the 18th benefit is to inform that it is appropriate for every person to endeavor for the peace of the king. Yeah, Ayala?
A question on the previous one.
Yeah.
What exactly is like the point of that? Like you said, to admire it. Like, is there like a practical thing we should be taking?
Let's actually read see if he says anything in the actual commentary. Hold on a second here. He doesn't mention Sofer. Mordechai. Oh, Bashar Melech. Okay. Let's see if this is going to say here. Yeah, here we go. So he says, Oz Mordechai Yoshe Bashar Melech. Then Mordechai was sitting at the gate of the king. Because of his chachma, they would consult him for matters of judgment. That's why I thought that he had a judicial role. Esther. Okay, fine. So then he talked about Esther some more. Right, and then he also mentions, I think this is what he was alluding to with the big Sam Zeresh, that Yidmeh Shekvar Noda Zehaso the Mordechai, that Mordechai got wind of the secret plot of Bigsan and Zeresh, either because they were speaking to each other in their own language, they thought no one could understand. And Mordechai was on the Sanhedrin. They had to understand all the languages. Or he was given this knowledge through Ruach HaKodesh. Or he inferred it from their manners, like how they were talking about it. Okay, then he says that. Yeah. So I think the question here is not what we. Give me 1 second here. My question is why he puts it in terms of the nation, to inform us of the great wisdom that was in our nation at the time. If it was about these are qualities that Mordechai had, and this is part of enhancing the esteem of Mordechai so that we look up to him and learn from him, I would understand that more. I don't know why he puts it in terms of the nation at that time. But if it were about Mordechai, I would be like, yeah, so this is someone who was very knowledgeable and he used his, if I were writing this toalos, here's what I would write. Okay, I would say that even though Mordechai was in exile, he still saw that it would be beneficial for the kingdom to be consulted in matters of justice. And his chachma was so great that it was recognized by the non-Jewish court, just like Yosef's chachma was recognized by Paro. And then that would lead us to admire Mordechai and to emulate him. Yeah, fair question. Okay. The 18th benefit is to inform that it is appropriate for every person to endeavor for the peace of the king under whom they live, even if they are not from his people, because the stability of the state is maintained through the king. And from this, one might receive good recompense from the king. Therefore, you find that Mordechai quickly revealed the plot of Bigsan and Zeresh as soon as it became known to him to protect the king from the harm they sought to inflict on him. And this brought benefit to him and to Israel as mentioned in this scroll. Okay, I think of this idea a lot when I'm in a shul where they say the prayer for the welfare of the U.S. government. And I think it's very good, especially in this highly polarized political climate, that, it's open to Mishnah and Pirkei Avos, right? Which is, I'll read it. Did we do that Mishnah that about the praying for the welfare of the government? I can't remember if we did. Yeah, so it must have been in chapter 3 then. Yeah, it's the second one. This is 3:2. Rabbi Chanina ben Sagan Kohanim Omer, have mispalo bishloma shel malchus. You should pray for the welfare of the monarchy or the government. Ilamali mora'ah, because without fear of it, ish es re'ehu chaim bala'o. Each man would swallow his fellow alive. So in this polarized situation in America, I'm sure there are a lot of Jews who frown and wrinkle their noses when they hear the person at shul praying for the welfare of President Biden and the Democratic government. And I'm sure people did that when Trump was president also. But it is not about yes, there are better and worse politicians and government officials, but overall, having the Chazal's position is that having a stable government is better than having anarchy. And if you're in doubt about that, then talk to Johnny about what goes on in Somalia and places where there's no government. I forgot, it's Somalia, Western Somalia, Eastern, whatever. I forgot. Places without government are bad. And so you should always try to fight, do everything you can for the stability of the government, because that'll ultimately be good, and it will position you to be on the good side of the king and maybe get rewarded. So again, I think when people are clouded by their own ego of I'm not going to support that king because he's bad, it just obliterates practicality. And Mordecai's practical, so he supported the king. Okay. The 19th benefit is to inform that when someone does a kindness out of love and respect, it is appropriate for them to ensure that the recipient of the kindness knows who did it for them. This clarifies to the benefactor that the kindness was done out of love for them, not by chance or without intention, and thus strengthens the love between them. Furthermore, this also ensures that the benefactor is repaid for their kindness. For this reason, you find that Mordechai informed Esther of the plot by Bigsan and Zeresh to assassinate King Achashverosh so that she could report the matter in his name, and the reward for this would be preserved for him when needed. Right. So this was made famous by what I was going to do in Pirkei Avos here, in the Mishnah in the sixth quote unquote chapter of Pirkei Avos, which is really not a chapter of Pirkei Avos. In the 48 things through which Torah is acquired. The last one is the Ha'omer Davar B'Shem Omro, one who says something in the name of the one who said it. Halamadata, you learn from here, Shekola Omer Davar B'Shem Omro Mevi Geula Le'olam, that anyone who says something in the name of the person who said it brings redemption to the world. Shneimar, as it says, Vatomer Esther Lamelach B'Shem Mordechai, that Esther told the king in the name of Mordechai. So if it weren't for the fact that she reported the assassination plot to the king in the name of Mordechai, then Mordechai's name would not be written in the records, and then the king would not have discovered his name when he woke up in the middle of the night in chapter 6, and would not have said, oh, I got to reward Mordechai, and that whole thing wouldn't have happened, and the Jews would not have been saved. So that's the same message, but Ralbag puts a little spin on it, is he universalizes it and says, like, when you do a kindness, I think the main thing is when you do a kindness, make sure that the recipient knows that it was you, because it'll give them a chance to reciprocate, and it'll increase mutual affection between you, and ensure that you get repaid. Now, what is the havamina? Like, why might a person not do this? Like, let's say you do a kindness to someone, and it's via someone else, and you don't make sure that they know that it was you. Why might you not do that? And I don't think there's one answer. There could be many reasons. Yeah, Ayala?
I think it's like publicizing yourself, like, I don't know, patting yourself on the back, kind of.
Yes, I think that there is a real risk or an imaginary risk. I think it could be both. That, like, by taking credit for it, then you're somehow like giving into gaiva, and for some people it really is a thing like that, but again, this is a very practical thing, and I'm going to give another off the record example. Yeah, okay. And again, just to reemphasize here, this is a Mishlaic principle, and yes, you do have to be worried about your own midos. And let's say, for example, you give tzedakah, and the highest level of tzedakah is anonymous, or what? Sorry, not the highest level. One of the higher levels of tzedakah is anonymous. But actually, this is a good example. Okay, in the levels of tzedakah, what's the highest level of tzedakah?
Isn't it like teaching a man to fish?
Yes, is providing a job for the person, right? Now, sometimes you could do that anonymously, right? But many times you can't, right? So, like, let's just go. I just want to see what the ranking is here in the Rambam in tzedakah matnos aniyim. I think he says the hierarchy in chapter 10. Yeah. So he says the highest level, 8 levels of tzedakah, mala gadola she'en lamala mimenu, zo hamachzik b'yad Yisrael she'mach, that you strengthen the hand of a Jew who became impoverished. V'nosin matana o halva'a o osa imo shutfus. You give him a gift, or you give him a loan, or you become his partner. O mamsi lo malacha, or you find a job for him. Kadei lachazek es yado actually start labrios, to strengthen him to not be dependent on people below yishal, and to not ask for money. Okay, so that's highest level. Okay, next level is we're not going to go through all of them, but hanosin tzedakah lanim, someone who gives tzedakah to the poor, v'lo yeda leminas, and they don't know who they give it to, v'lo yada ha'ani mimi lakach, and the poor person doesn't know who he took from. Sharizo mitzvah lishma, that is a mitzvah lishma. Okay, now, what if a person says, well, I would give a gift or a loan to this person to take him out of his poverty, but because he's going to know that it's from me, and I don't want to give it to gaiva, then I'm going to go on the second level of tzedakah. That would actually be worse, right? So in other words, there are times, the point I'm trying to make is there are times when you should do something because objectively it's better, even if it's not as good for your midos. Okay, giving a person a loan and them knowing who gave it to them is a better form of tzedakah, even though it might cater to your ego a bit to be like, oh, I enabled this guy to like get on his feet again, you know. So that's, I think, an example here as well. So like all those issues, it's not a clear issue. You have to like balance it. Yeah, Brooke.
It's actually funny. Shu and I had this debate because we when at the end of the year when we were dividing up our like where we wanted to give our money, one of the things we wanted to give it to was you because we like your shirim, and there were multiple options of how to give you money, one of which was anonymous but would take some money for the platform, and one of which would go directly to you but was not anonymous, and we wanted to ask you because well we couldn't, so I
remember. I think you should have told me about that. That's a good example, right? Is that being a greater tzedakah or chesed, and it was good for the reason that the Ralbag said, because I had a lot of goodwill towards you guys. You know, I still do, but so it ended up being good for everyone, good all around. Okay, next is the 20th benefit is in character traits, is to inform that it is not appropriate for anyone to do anything against the monarchy because nothing can be hidden from the king, and this will be a cause to bring upon themselves severe punishment. Surely you can see what happened to Bigsan and Seresh, who sought to lay hands on King Achashverosh. Now, again, like any issue in Midos, it's not a black and white rule. There are times when you have to overthrow the monarchy, right? You know, there are times when you have an evil king who's like, you know, doing bad stuff. But in general, it's saying that you should not act against the monarchy because nothing can be hidden from the king, right? Like, don't think that you can get away with doing stuff and not get caught. And this applies on smaller scales to like smaller forms of monarchy, like in a company or in a in any system. That like you should be very careful about acting against the system because you might be found out, and that could be bad for you. I'm watching right now. It's an amazing documentary on Netflix. I can't remember the last time I saw a documentary that like I literally have to like force myself to stop watching because I was just binge it. It's about the Cold War, and so I'm getting like this nice review of like a bunch of stuff that like what was going on in the Soviet Union at the time. Definitely applies there. You don't want to go against the Soviet Union because they'll know what's going to happen. Okay, 21st benefit is to inform that it is appropriate for a person to always remember the kindnesses done for them to ensure that they can repay those kindnesses. It is also appropriate to remember all events as they happen because from these, a person can gain knowledge by seeing what outcomes emerge from beginnings and from beginnings of those very matters. All right, this might be a ChatGPT mistake. Let's see. Roy l'skor kol hakoros hamischadros kimehem yilamed ha'anam das birosam ki ezo tachlis nischadesh mihaschala v'haschala. From the each of the beginnings of those matters. Okay, that's a Ralbagian term. For this reason, you find that when Mordechai revealed about Bigsan and Seresh was written in the book of Chronicles in the presence of the king, where other new events were also recorded. This is why it was called the book of Chronicles or the book of memories. Okay, so the simple lesson is write down all the stuff that happens so that you can repay those kindnesses. So again, let's here ask, what is the Havamina? And I'm not saying necessarily the Havamina for Achashverosh. I want to think about this in terms of us. What would be a practical case where not doing this would result in some bad for you? Practical case that might come up. Yeah, Tamar?
You just like on a basic level, if someone does you a favor and then you like forget about it, then you're not gonna want to do you another favor later.
Okay, right. So there's a very practical thing. People operate in a reciprocal fashion, and even if they're a nice person, there is part of them that expects something good in return. And if you forget about it, if you, the recipient, forget about that, then you're not going to be you're not going to necessarily return the favor, and it might upset them. I'll give another example that is closer to this, which is that when a life cycle event happens, whether it is the birth of a new baby or a wedding or like a funeral, and people express their what do you call it, simcha, or their mazel tovs or their condolences, or they give gifts. Actually, I'll use this example, is that when my grandmother died a year ago, then there was a huge delay over the funeral, and it was like a very stressful time. And there were a bunch of people who like, either wrote nice things to my mom or like gave like gifts, which I guess is a thing they do in Hawaii. And my mom made it a point to like make sure that she got records of all the people, because she knew it would be very easy to forget someone. And like, I think there's a concern that some people might also get very offended if you don't remember that they did this good thing for you, and they'll be like, well, I gave this present and they like didn't even thank me, and that could lead to like problems for you as well. So I think the emphasis here is, yeah, the main message is the reciprocity, but I think the record keeping is what he's referring to here. And don't leave it to your memory, make a record of it. Like, for example, whenever anyone gives any donation for the Rabbi Shneim's Torah Content Fund, the first thing I do is I have an Excel file and I immediately type it in and I say the date that they gave and the amount that they gave. And then when I do a sponsorship, I highlight it in green so that I know that like I have, and I also thank them, but I also do the sponsorship in green to make sure that I've actually like used their sponsor. So records are, you think that you're going to remember, but let's put it this way: you, the recipient, are more likely to forget than the giver is likely to forget. So yeah. Okay. 22. The 22nd benefit is to, Ayala.
Also, I think it's like interesting that he mentioned the second sentence, that also like if you're remembering events, you can see like future outcomes and the consequences in a mishlaic way.
Yes, that's great. Right. So that is an argument as well for okay, there's certain mindfulness practices that I have that like I've been able to keep going pretty well. Like meditation is pretty good, and like the gratitude journal, but like I still have this complex relationship with journaling, and I know there are people who journal and who don't read it. Okay, like my mom has journaled for, actually maybe she does read it, but I know there are people who journal and they just, it's the act of journaling that is significant. But then there are people who journal, and then when they're facing something in their lives that is like a decision or like a tragedy or whatever, they'll go back and they'll like comb through their journals of certain periods for data, and it is amazing like what a person can forget, and like things. And I've lived long enough to know that this is the case of like things that were traumatic or were like that, or that you were ecstatic about, you can just totally forget that they even happened, And when you're trying to do a mishlaic analysis for decision making, then having a written record of it is very helpful for that, because you don't let anything slip through the cracks. Yeah, good point. Okay. 22nd benefit is to inform of the depth of the thoughts of the Lord. Okay, this is something I have been changing. I like changing to Hashem. Blessed be he in saving Israel. For this reason, he orchestrated that the incident with Bigsan and Sirish would be revealed to King Achashverosh by Mordechai, ensuring that this would be preserved for him and for Israel when needed. Now, side point here, this is, whenever he says the depths of the thoughts of Hashem, that is a reference to Hashgacha, okay? Even though he doesn't use the word Hashgacha. We know that the Purim story is a Nes Nister. It was hidden miracles, and that it's unclear at what point in the story were God's hand, okay, so to speak. So Ralbag does seem to be weighing in on which things he holds were Hashgacha and which ones were not. So far, he says that the choosing of Esther was Hashgacha, and the revelation of Bigsan V'Serish was Hashgacha. But there are certain things that have happened up until this point in the story which other people hold was Hashgacha, and the Ralbag doesn't. And can anyone like identify any, like just from what you've heard about, like at what point did God intervene prior to this in the story? I happen to be thinking about only one example, but maybe there are more. Okay, anyone think about one with Vashti? So
like her refusing.
Okay,
yeah, her refusing. But what do you have a specific like Hashgacha thing that someone says that caused her to refuse? Tomorrow,
is there like a medrash or something that there was like she had like spots or a tail or something?
Yes, right. So that's what I was thinking. There's a Gemara that says that she sprouted saras, or that Gavriel made her made her grow a tail. So like, that's not literal according to many people, but like I think saying that Gavriel did it is Chazal weighing in and saying like that was a moment of hashgacha, you know? So the Ralbag is not taking that. So when you're learning about the Megillah, one of the other benefits of the Megillah is you learn about God's hashgacha and learning what, you know, Ralbag was a pshat-based mafarish. He rarely takes the midrash as historical. So when you see him say something like this, it's a piece of data of like, what does the Ralbag view as a hashgacha? And if you learn the story, then maybe you can see, well, why did he treat that as hashgacha and not something else? Like, let's just read here and see if he says, whoa, I highlighted this. Okay, I don't know why I highlighted that. Let's just see what he says by Bigsan and Seresh, if he says any clue here. So he says here, by Yamim Hayim, Mordechai Yosheb Shar Melech, Yidmeh Shekvar Noda. Oh, we just read that. So Mordechai knew about the secret because he spoke languages. Ulazeh Sibur Shekvar Kas Kol Echad Me'elu Shnei Hasarisim Shayu Misari Hamashkim V'Gia Mikasam Shebikshu Lishloch Yad B'Melech Achashverosh. So they were the cupbearers of the king, and they wanted to poison. Sorry, they got angry at the king, and they wanted Lahamiso Basam Hamavis Shisimu B'Yain, to poison him by poisoning his wine. Because Mordechai knew of their anger, Al Hamelech, over the king, and he sensed their request for the venom that would kill. Shafat Tekef, he immediately judged, he made a snap judgment, that for this reason, the poison was hastened to them. So he's trying to explain why it says that they why the pasuk highlights their anger. So he doesn't talk about the hashgacha here. Never mind. I mean, he says Ruach HaKodesh, but that's not hashgacha necessarily. Okay. All right, onward. I think wait. Yeah. All right, fine. So I think that's just a lesson in the hashgacha. Okay. All right, on to chapter 3. I'm fine going to 12:15 or even 12:30. I don't know what your time frame is. But let's go to 12:15 and see where we are at, because that's what I listed on the thing. Okay, the 23rd benefit is to inform that it is not appropriate for a person to bow down or prostrate themselves for the sake of divinity, except to Hashem, blessed is he, even if the fear of the monarchy compels it. Surely you can see that Mordechai, despite being aware of the danger to himself for not bowing or prostrating to Haman, did not agree to bow down to prostrate him. So you learn here, you know, you can't bow down to a divinity other than Hashem. And that's Yahareg Vel Yavor. You should give up your life rather than do that. And this goes with the 24th one. He says, the 24th benefit is to inform that it is not appropriate for a person to deviate from the king's commandments unless observing his commandments would deviate from the commandments of Hashem, blessed be he, who is the King of Kings. When the king's servants rebuked Mordechai, asking why he transgressed the king's commandments, he justified himself by informing them that he was a Jew and was forbidden by the Lord, by Hashem, blessed be he, from bowing or prostrating to anyone else in a way that implies divinity. Now, here's the key point for both toalos. If it were not clear that in this matter one would not be obliged to follow the king's command, his justification would have not sufficed. Okay, so Ralbag is going with the view that Haman made himself into a god. Okay, I'm just going to read his commentary here just to flesh out the facts. So it seems like because of Haman's great stature vis-a-vis the king, then the king commanded all of his officers to bow down to Haman to make him into a god. Okay, and I don't know if you remember this or if you've learned this in who else was made into a god. When Nebuchadnezzar heard Daniel interpret Nebuchadnezzar's dream and give the interpretation, Amar Lasos Minu Eloah, then Nebuchadnezzar decreed that Daniel be made into a god. Okay, so it's funny, right? Is that we think that Haman made himself into a god. I think that's how I usually think of the story. But we have to remember that in the Psukim it says the king commanded that Haman be made into a god. Well, why would the king command people to make Haman into a god? Because that's what kings did back then. Is when someone was a good advisor, they made them into a god. What's the proof? Nebuchadnezzar literally made Daniel into a god. Belshazzar Kishem Elohav. He renamed Daniel Belshazzar after his own god. Because Belshazzar means, I think it means Bel is like Baal, and Shatzar is related, I think, to Bavel, god of Bavel. Okay, Daniel sagid umincha unchochin, and amar lenaskale, and he brought offerings to Daniel. Okay, it's like this is like a thing that to us, like I think this is another case of like us projecting into the past, is that when we hear that Haman was a god, we think it was purely an expression of megalomania. Okay, but the plain pshat of the psukim is Haman did not make himself into a god. Achashverosh made him into a god, and then we still say, well, that's somehow megalomania. But no, it was a thing that they attributed divine power to good advisors, and the proof of it is also in the pshat of Sefer Daniel. So that's what was going on here. Okay, and again, this you got to be aware. You know, it is very interesting. Should I say this on the recording or off the recording? I'll say it on the recording.
We don't know what you're going to say.
Yeah, I know. I'll say it on the recording, which is that that you know me, that I make a clear distinction between pshat and drash. Okay, and I generally tend towards mafarshim that do the same. Ibn Ezra, Ralbag, Sforno, Rashbam, Avram ben Rambam, Radak. So I think that in our yeshiva, then because we learn midrashim like rationally, and we do learn non-fantastical ideas from midrashim, I think what ends up happening is, I think in our yeshiva, then I think people are prone to treating things as pshat that are not pshat for a different reason than the frum world. I think in the frum world, they treat it as, they treat pshat as drash because they're never taught the difference, or they're just taught little midrash says, or they're taught Rashi and Chumash, and they think that that is the pshat. But I think in our yeshiva, then what happens is we're taught compelling rational ideas about the Megillah that are based on midrash, but they're so compelling that we read them into the pshat without realizing that it's coming from midrashim. So I think this is an example that that you cannot deny in the pshat that Achashverosh made everyone bow down to Haman, but we learn Haman as this egomaniac, and Chazal say that, I think Chazal say that he made himself into a god, and so what happens is we forget that the pshat actually says that Achashverosh commanded people to bow down to him. So we read this whole egotistical trend into Haman. Now, I'm not saying that Haman is not egotistical. Clearly, later on in the story, he brags to everyone about how great he is and stuff. So he is egotistical. But again, it's just that fine line between what is drush and what is pshat, and like keeping that in mind is important. And pshat-based mafarshim like the Ralbag, who bring evidence from the text, I think like really like make it hard to forget that. And I think this is like a great example of that. Okay, ulazos hasiba, and for this reason, Baruch Mordechai milichro milishachvos lahaman. That's why Mordechai literally fled from bowing down and prostrating himself to Haman. Ki lulezeh lo haya roy lo shiavor es mitzvas hamelach ba'avor minias kavod sar echad min hasarim. There's no way Mordechai would have refrained from giving honor to an officer. V'zeh mevur mihamar korim ushachim v'im lahaman. Kichin tziva lo hamelach. Rotzalomar kichin tziva hamelach ba'atzmo. It's only because the king commanded it. And that's the only reason why it was even a shaila, and then because it was a god, then that's why Mordechai didn't do it. And here's another good shot here. What reason does Mordechai give? I don't think this is a chiddush. The king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordechai, "Why are you transgressing the king's command?" And it was when they said this to him day after day. And he didn't listen to them. V'yagidu lahaman liros hayamdu divrei Mordechai ki higid lahem asher hu Yehudi. They told Haman to see whether Mordechai's words would stand, for he had told them that he was a Judean, okay, or a Jew. So Ralbag says, Rotzalamar ki Mordechai higid lahem ki mipnei dato hu nimna milishtachvos laman. He's saying I'm a Jew, meaning my religion prohibits me from bowing down to Haman. Ki hu Yehudi, because I'm a Jew. I can only treat Hashem as a god. And this shows you that that's the reason why he didn't want to bow down. Now, there are other interpretations, for example, that like some say that bowing down to Haman would have been halachically permissible. that bowing down, it was really bowing down for kavod, so it's permissible. And some want to say that Mordechai did this as like a philosophical act of giving up his life, and it wasn't halakhically warranted. And that gets to the whole question about, are you allowed to give up your life in an optional way? And that's a big machlokes between the toalos and the Rambam. Toalos holds you can, and Rambam holds it's usher. And so like this gets into a whole complication, but Ralbag takes it straight that no, Haman was a avodah zarah, and he couldn't bow down to him. Okay, so yeah, so that is a halakhic benefit. One thing I noticed, by the way, is I mentioned at the beginning of Shir yesterday that the toalos of the Ralbag are either mitzvos, midos, and deos, and I'm noticing that he's not calling the halakhic ones here mitzvos. It might be because he does say in the 51st toeles, spoiler alert, is the commandments, is the mitzvos midivrei sofrim. So the only real mitzvos in the Megillah are the actual like new mitzvos that come up. So I think it might be that he that he's classifying this as like, because he doesn't call this midos. This is halachic, but it's not giving you new halacha. It's really like a commentary almost on the Torah's mitzvah of Yaharag vo Yavor. So I don't know why he doesn't call it like Inyan HaTorah or something like that, but just observation. Okay. 25th. Actually, let's stop with the 25th. Wait, hold on a second. Oh, good. Let's finish these last two, and then we'll be halfway through, and then we'll be at chapter 4. Okay. The 25th benefit is to inform that it is not appropriate for a person, because of their power with the king, to trust that they can do whatever they desire with a large number of people. Okay, that's also a mistranslation of the pasuk in Koheles. Ki gavoa me'al gavoa shomer. Okay, that's actually a difficult pasuk to translate. For higher than higher is a guard. I think this is talking about God. Okay, but the point is that there's a hierarchy, and then at the top of the hierarchy is Hashem. That the one at the top of the ultimate hierarchy will prevent the fulfillment of their desire, whether through a general providence or a specific providence. Surely you can see that Haman, because of his confidence in his position in the royal house, I just want to see the Hebrew he uses. Yeah, Batzcho, because of his confidence in his position in the royal house, attempted with the king to kill and destroy all the Jews from young to old, at a time he thought most suitable for achieving his goal. His words were also crafted in a way that seemed most likely to achieve his desired outcome, informing the king that this people would bring great harm to him, and that there was no benefit to the king in keeping them alive, and that their destruction would bring great benefit to the king. Not only did he not achieve his desire, but this was the cause for Israel to destroy him and his entire family. So this is the lesson of don't think you can outsmart God. And he says so it's interesting. I think we say that it was Haman's haughtiness that caused him to his downfall. Ralbag attributes it to his security in being in good standing with the king, which might stem from his haughtiness, but he's saying like it's a calculated, like the Mishlaic mistake here is saying I have the king's protection and the king can't do anything to me. And I think that fits in really well with the pshat, because the king turns on him turns against him on a dime later on. So like the real Mida Keneged Mida is the king gives me permission to do whatever I want, and then no, the king like kills me. Yeah, Tamar.
I feel like there's two threads in this idea, and I'm not sure like how they relate to each other.
Yeah.
There's like maybe it sounds like he's saying something about like the type of plan that he was trying to fill out. Like you should not try and carry out a plan like this, but also it sounds like it's about hashgacha, and I like not quite seeing. Like, is he making a practical point or a specific point or both? And how
so I think the key word here is that he said, it is very interesting. He specifically mentions im mitzad hashgacha hakoleles, im mitzad hashgacha pratis. So he says you could understand this purely in terms of the laws of nature, that even if there's no hashgacha pratis involved, don't get too confident when you're about being in the good graces of the king, because that could vanish and it could fail. And like in my documentary I'm watching about Stalin had many people who were close to him who he just like killed. Okay, and then in terms of hashgacha pratis, then don't forget that there is a God who cares about justice and who cares about the Jewish people in particular, and that God can thwart your plans. So I think it is both points.
So, but what was the mistake? Not that he was trying to accomplish something, but that he was confident.
The mistake was thinking that this king is going to be the determiner of his his success and not the king.
Okay, but also that he was trusting Okay, he was trusting that the king was not going to turn on him, or he was trusting that the king was going to accomplish what he wanted?
I think that the king was not going to take was going to let him do whatever he wanted. I'll just read in Hebrew just because it might be clear. Lodia ki ein roy la'adam. It's not appropriate for a person. Mipnei otem yado, due to his strength. Sorry, otem yado imamel, due to his. There's got to be a better word for this. His strong reach with the king, like his strong influence with the king. Liftoah hazeh, to trust in this. Sheyuchal lasos mashiachbots, to think that he can do what he wants. Me'am rav, with a large people, ki gavoa ki gavoa me'al gavoha, sway with the king, ki gavoa me'al gavoha shomer, because there's a hierarchy and there's a guardian above all of them. Yimna'ehu mehashlamas ratono, and that guardian, God, will prevent him from fulfilling his desire. Imitzad hashgacha klolos, imitzad hashgacha pratis, either due to hashgacha klolos or hashgacha pratis. Halotir, don't you see ki Haman mipnei batchel al yado bives hamalchus? Haman, due to his security in his own power in the house of the king, he strove to wipe out all the Jews from youth to old people. And then he got thwarted. So it does seem to be like he's viewing himself as the only arbiter of whether I'll succeed is this king. This king gave me his ring, so I can do whatever I want, and no one can stop me. But in reality, no. God can stop you in a hashgacha pratis way, and even in a hashgacha klolos way, the king who gave the power can take away the power.
Thanks.
Yeah. Ayala?
It reminds me of the pasuk from Hallel of Al Titchud ben Divin.
Yes. Right. Don't trust in nobles. Yep. Those that pesky trust. Yeah. Okay, last one for today. The 26th benefit is to inform of the immense power of Hashem, blessed be He, specific for, hold on. Lodia otim hashgachas Hashem hapratis, the specific power of Hashem's specific providence. I'm going to say it like that. For on the very day deemed suitable for the harm to come to Israel by general providence, that day turned into relief and success for them, and they destroyed all their enemies. Surely you can see that the lot was cast before Haman to determine the day on which harm should come to Israel. And on that very day, the Lord, blessed be He, arranged for the situation to turn around from what Haman had planned. Now, we, I think in our yeshiva, also tend to, because we hold by the Rambam, we hold that astrology is totally false. And that Haman cast the lots to determine what day to kill the Jews, and that was like part of Haman's like foolishness, is that he like thought that the lottery would like determine the most auspicious day, but like it ended up being like a practically bad decision for him. But Ralbag believed in astrology, and so he really held that that I think he held that like Haman actually found the best day to kill the Jews, but God's hashgacha is so great that it overrode the lottery, the results of the lottery, and so that's a real vanahafahu, more so than a Rambam, than Rambam would hold, right? Rambam held that the hashgacha was saving Israel, but like the stuff about the astrology was like total foolishness, But Ralbag says no, astrology meant that Haman had all the universe, all the stars were aligned to make Haman succeed, but God thwarted that through hashgacha pratis. So really, according, one of the classic questions on Purim is, why is it called Purim? Why name the holiday after the lots? I don't know how we answer that, and to us it is a little weird because the lots were such a small part of this. But to Ralbag, it's a really great name for the holiday because it was, Haman put all of his trust in the stars, and God overrode that. So like it's a much more central, the lottery plays a much more central role in the story if you hold that astrology is real, which again, obviously we know it's not, but like, Ralbag works out very well for him. Okay, so we have now reached the halfway point, at least count-wise, but as you can see from the page numbers, we're on 8 of 22. Okay, so so I don't think my goal of doing the next 25 on Friday, we don't have shir on Thursday because of the chagiga and the break fast. On Friday, I would like to give shir, but I think what we're going to do is like this: is I'm going to look through the Megillah, and I would really like to give like a sugya based shir, like some topic. So if I find a good one, I'd like to give shir on that, and maybe you can save these other toalos for next year, Leanetter, God willing. Okay, but I hope this has been a fun journey. I mean, I'm having a ton of fun with this Ralbag. It's a really, really nice ideas. It does feel like learning Mishlei Psukim from the Megillah, Okay. Have a good Shabbos, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Have a good Shabbos.
Have a good
Thank you so
Shabbos.
much.